There is always one person like this in almost every group. When someone gets mocked, interrupted, cornered, or quietly pushed aside, most people notice it, but say nothing. They look away. They tell themselves it is not their business. They assume the other person will handle it. Or they simply follow the emotional gravity of the room, which usually pulls toward the louder voice, the more confident person, the one with more status, more approval, more power. But then there is that one person who cannot stay quiet. Maybe they do not raise their voice. Maybe they do not look intimidating. Maybe they are not even the most outspoken person in the room. And yet, when someone weaker is being dismissed, shamed, or overpowered, something in them reacts almost instantly. They step in. They redirect the conversation. They defend the person everyone else is overlooking, sometimes gently, sometimes sharply, but almost always instinctively. And if you watch them closely, it does not look calculated. It looks automatic. So why are some people like that? Why do some people consistently defend the weaker side, even when it creates tension, even when it costs them socially, even when nobody asked them to? At first it may look like simple kindness, but psychologically it usually goes deeper than that. Because these people are not just nice, they're often unusually sensitive to something most others are trained to ignore. Power imbalance. That is the real key. Most people think they are reacting to conflict, but they are not reacting to conflict itself. They are reacting to the shape of the conflict. They are scanning for who has more power, who has the advantage, who is safer in the room, who can speak without consequences, and who cannot. While other people see an argument, they see asymmetry. They notice who keeps getting interrupted, who is being laughed at instead of listened to, who has to explain themselves 3 times while someone else gets believed immediately, who is shrinking in real time while another person expands. And once they see that pattern, it becomes very hard for them to stay neutral, because to them, neutrality in that moment does not feel neutral at all. It feels like participation. This is where many people misunderstand them. People often assume that those who defend the weaker side are emotional, naive, overly sensitive, or unable to see both sides. But that is not always true. In many cases, they actually do see both sides. They just cannot ignore what happens when one side has more protection, more influence, more social permission, and more force behind their voice. In psychology, one of the traits that helps explain this is justice sensitivity. Some people have a stronger internal reaction to unfairness than others. Not just obvious cruelty, not just extreme abuse. Even subtle imbalance can trigger something in them. A sarcastic tone, a humiliating joke, a group turning against one person, someone being framed as too sensitive because they do not have the power to defend themselves well. For a person with high sensitivity to injustice, these moments do not pass by as small social details. They land heavily. Their nervous system reads them as important. And when you combine that with strong empathy, you get a person who does not just understand pain intellectually, they feel pulled toward it. That is why defending the weaker side often feels less like a decision and more like a reflex. They are not sitting there thinking, what moral position should I take? Their body already knows something is wrong before their mind finishes organizing the thought. But people are rarely born in a vacuum. Traits like this may have a natural foundation, but very often, life sharpens them. And if you look into the past of people who always protect the weaker side, you will often find one of 2 patterns. The first is this: they once were the weaker side, or maybe not in every situation, maybe not all the time. But at some formative point in life, they knew what it felt like to have less power. To be the child nobody defended, to be misunderstood in a family where louder people controlled the emotional climate, to be dismissed in school, to be the one people talked over, to be the one expected to absorb discomfort quietly so others could stay comfortable. When someone has lived in that position long enough, they develop a deep memory for helplessness. And later in life, when they see someone else standing in that same emotional position, something old wakes up. Not always consciously. Sometimes they do not even realize why they are reacting so strongly. But psychologically, they are not just seeing another person. They are also seeing a version of themselves, a younger self, a quieter self, a self that once needed someone to step in and did not get it. And sometimes, without fully meaning to, they become the protector they once needed. The second pattern is slightly different. Some people were not the direct victim, but they witnessed unfairness early and often. They grew up watching one family member dominate another. They watched someone get blamed unfairly. They saw how power really works long before other children did. They learned that being right does not always protect you, that being kind does not always save you, that the strongest voice in the room is not necessarily the most truthful one. And once a person learns that deeply enough, they do not move through the world the same way anymore. They become more alert, more observant, sometimes more burdened. Because now they cannot unsee what others still call normal. This is why many of these people are highly perceptive in social situations. They pick up on subtle emotional currents. They notice who is performing confidence and who is suppressing fear. They hear the hidden threat under a polite sentence. They notice when a joke is really a form of social control. They can often tell when a group has silently decided who matters more. That kind of perception can look impressive from the outside. And sometimes it is, but it is also exhausting. Because when you are highly attuned to unfairness, the world can start to feel emotionally loud. You do not just see what is happening, you feel the weight of it. And this brings us to the beautiful side of these people, because there is a beautiful side. The people who defend the weaker side are often the ones who make others feel safe in ways they never forget. They are the friend who notices who got excluded, the co-worker who protects the person no one takes seriously yet, the sibling who breaks toxic family patterns by finally naming what everyone else has been pretending not to see, the partner who is not impressed by dominance and does not confuse harshness with strength. In environments shaped by ego, hierarchy, and image, they bring conscience. They are often the people who quietly restore balance. And what makes them different is not just that they care. It is that their care has courage inside it. Because many people feel empathy in private. Far fewer are willing to embody it publicly. That is what separates silent compassion from active protection. And the people who defend the weaker side often cross that line. They do not just feel bad, they intervene. Even when it is awkward, even when the room turns on them, even when there is no reward for doing it. That is why some of the strongest moral personalities do not look strong in the conventional sense. They may not seek authority. They may not want attention. They may not dominate conversations. But when the moment asks for protection, they become unexpectedly solid. Still, this trait has a hidden cost. And this is the part people talk about less. Because defending the weaker side sounds noble, and often it is. But when this pattern becomes deeply wired into someone's identity, it can start to hurt them too. One reason is over-identification. These people often do not just sympathize with the vulnerable person. They merge with them emotionally. They feel their humiliation too closely. They absorb the injustice as if it happened directly to them. Their inner boundaries can blur. And when that happens, every unfair situation starts demanding energy from them. Every imbalance becomes personal. Every wounded person activates responsibility. Every abuse of power feels like something they have to answer. Over time, this can become heavy, because no one can carry every imbalance they see. Another cost is the savior tendency. Not everyone who defends the weak falls into this, but some do. They become so used to stepping in, rescuing, correcting, protecting, and speaking up that they begin to feel responsible for saving people who may not be ready, willing, or able to change their situation. And that can create a painful pattern. They keep giving energy where there is no reciprocity. They keep entering battles that are not fully theirs. They feel guilty for stepping back. They confuse self-sacrifice with moral consistency. At that point, their compassion starts working against them. Because compassion without boundaries becomes depletion. And depletion changes people. It can make them irritable, cynical, emotionally overextended, quietly resentful that they are always the one who notices, always the one who cares, always the one who has to say something while everyone else gets to remain comfortable. This is one of the deepest contradictions in these personalities. They're often tender people living with a permanently activated defense system, which means they may look calm most of the time, until they witness cruelty. Then suddenly something hard appears, and this surprises people. Because the same person who seems soft, patient, thoughtful, even gentle, can become intensely direct when someone weaker is being mistreated. It feels like a personality switch, but it is not. It is actually the same personality reaching its protective edge. They are not becoming aggressive for no reason. They are becoming fierce because, in that moment, passivity feels like betrayal. That is the paradox. They do not usually fight to dominate. They fight to prevent domination. They are not drawn to conflict for pleasure. They are drawn into conflict when protection feels necessary, and that difference matters, because from the outside, all confrontation can look the same. But psychologically, motive changes everything. Some people confront in order to control. Others confront in order to defend. One is about power. The other is about boundaries around power. And the people who always defend the weaker side often live at that exact intersection. They are not impressed by status for its own sake. They do not automatically trust the loudest person, the most confident person, or the person everyone else seems eager to agree with. They tend to care more about moral coherence than social rank. That is why they can seem difficult in unhealthy environments. In families that reward silence, they seem disruptive. In workplaces built on politics, they seem idealistic. In groups that normalize cruelty as humor, they seem too serious. In systems that protect authority first, they seem threatening. But sometimes what a system calls difficult is simply a person who refuses to help normalize harm. And that is why these people are so often misunderstood. Their sensitivity gets mistaken for weakness. Their refusal to stay silent gets mistaken for drama.